Welcome, everybody, to the SoxProspects.com podcast, the web's number one source for information on the Boston Red Sox from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Worcester, across the Pike to Fenway, and all stops in between. Thank you all for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield. I'm the executive editor of Sox Prospects, and I'm joined, as always, by our director of scouting, who I was tempted to make the intro joke jokey thing about the fact that a hurricane was named after you, Ian, but with the way that Hurricane Ian hit Florida, I'm not really inclined to. So I think instead I'll just say our hearts and minds go out to everyone in Fort Myers and in Florida who got whacked by that hurricane, and instead just say welcome to the podcast to our director of scouting, Ian Kundle. Ian, it is. Go ahead. Yeah. No,
you're good. I was just gonna say hello. Thank you for having me. And I just echo that. Obviously, that was a bad storm, and hopefully everyone's safe. And I know we have a lot of listeners and people who follow the site down in Florida, so hopefully they made it through, relatively unscathed and can kind of start the rebuilding process.
I think I read tonight in the headline that it was like the deadliest storm to hit Florida since 1935 or something.
Yeah, not great. And Fort Myers seemed to get the brunt of it.
It really did.
Was not originally in the path, which obviously was not good. So yeah.
We have family in the Tampa area that we thought were going to get hit directly, and they said it was the worst winds that they had ever experienced. But they lost part of a fence.
I have friends down there, obviously a lot of them, and the people I talked to in the Tampa area, they said they're like, oh yeah, it was really windy, but we didn't even lose power.
Yeah,
and then you compare that with Fort Myers, and obviously there was
the road to Sanibel. The road to Sanibel has been washed out.
The Fort Myers Pier is like gone.
Yeah,
there was that video I sent you of like the shark swimming down like Main Street in Fort Myers. It's a tough situation.
Scary situation. Hearts and minds with everyone down there. Hopefully you're all doing okay. And hey, if we can be a little bit of a distraction, cool. That's why we're here. But it is October 5th as we record this. The Red Sox season just ended, which means the Boston Red Sox organization, at least for affiliated ball, is officially over for the 2022 season. Obviously a bit of a disappointing year at the major league level, but plenty to talk about, recapping. And we're going to start today with a kind of season in review series where we're going to go position by position and just talk about the highlights, talk about the players, what there is to discuss looking back on the season. Today, we will start with the high minors pitchers, and we'll work from there to low minors pitching. And then in future episodes, of course, we'll go position by position, catchers, corner infielders, middle infielders, outfielders, talk about what happened at each level, what the main storylines were, what happened at every level, what happened with given players, who's up, who's down, etc. So we hope you're looking forward to that. We're looking forward to recapping that as well. And of course, as always, we'll get to your emails. If you want to email us, you can do so at podcast@soxprospects.com. As we like to say, we want to talk about what you want to hear about. So hit us up, and we got a ton more emails today. If you want to support the show, you can do it a couple ways. First, rate and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen. Stitcher helps get the show into the algorithm and into some new earballs. So that would be helpful. Of course, you can tell a friend as well. When you're talking to your cousin tomorrow night, wishing them a happy birthday. Tell them about the podcast. Say, hey, you would enjoy this. And of course, you can support us on patreon.com/SoxProspects. You can do that, pledge a certain amount per episode, and get some neat perks. Ian and I were just talking before the show about the fact that we need to record our episode giving scouting reports from the movie The Bad News Bears, the original, of course. That'll be happening at some point this offseason.
Wait, we're not watching the Billy Bob Thornton one?
I mean, we could do that one too, but
is that the original?
No.
Oh.
No.
Okay.
The Walter Matthau version is the original.
Who?
You're joking, right? Walter Matthau? Grumpy Old Men? No.
Nope.
Okay.
1976, your time, not mine.
I wasn't alive either, brother. It's a classic, though. Jackie Earl Haley's in it. Oh, there goes the cat. Anyway, yeah. So we'll be doing that for patrons soon. So if you want to, that's going to be a heck of an episode. I'm really looking forward to how that's going to go. So yeah, check us out again, patreon.com/SoxProspects. So Ian, I guess some quick news and if not news, maybe kind of reports and such things since the last episode. I guess, first of all, the Arizona Fall League started this week. We've already mentioned the players who are down there. You can check out the players who are playing winter ball and fall ball at soxprospects.com/fall-winter. There's also a link on the front page of the site as well. But Arizona Fall League started pretty good outing yesterday by Thaddeus Ward in his first start. I don't know if you saw, I went 4 2/3. The only blemish was a home run to Brennan Davis, which will happen. He's coming off a pretty bad year, but Davis, that is. But I think he was also hurt. But a pretty good start. All the 4 hitters have all gotten into games, and I think Jacob Webb closed the opener by striking out Jason Dominguez, which is a pretty good way to start the fall. So, yeah, make sure you keep an eye there. Not much to talk about there yet. They're 3 games in. But yeah, that's just started. And as far as other new players who we know are playing winter ball, Gilberto Jimenez is playing in the Dominican for Gigantes del Cibao. Darwinzon Hernandez and Edward Bizardo are going to be playing in Venezuela. We don't know for whom yet. And Christian Koss is going to be playing for Caguas in Puerto Rico. So those last 3 were all per Alex Cora, apparently the other day. But it was kind of fun. I guess Kelly was saying, I don't know if you saw this, I guess he said at one of the press conferences, like, yeah, we got Koss, like we meaning Caguas, because that's the team that he used to be the GM for. So he was excited about it, apparently. So anyway, new guys down there again, soxprospects.com/fall-winter. So check that out. The other news, because I can't remember if we've really discussed this yet, Ian, on the show, but Ronaldo Hernandez is on the 40-man, obviously, and we thought he was out of options because he burned his 3rd option year this year. But apparently, and I forget who reported this, and I feel bad, but apparently, it was Chris Smith, I think, because that's right, we were talking about it. Apparently, Ronaldo Hernandez is going to qualify for a 4th option here, which is pretty huge because it was difficult to see, honestly, how he sticks around this system next year if he was not able to be optioned, because he's certainly not at a point where you would really be ready to have him on the major league roster. If you've got, the Connor Wong, Reese McGuire pair, which is what it seems to be what the Red Sox are going to go with, Ian. But at any rate, that seems to be what they're going with. It works. And the fact that they can option Ronaldo Hernandez is pretty huge. Not to get too far into the rule, I guess it's that within your first, what is it? If you do not have 5 seasons in the minors or majors, 5 seasons of professional ball, and you have burned 3 options, you can get a 4th. It's weird for him because he technically, let's see, so he had 3 years in rookie ball, 2 years in full season, then 2020, then 2021 and 22. The only years that wind up counting because of the way the rule works were like the 2 full season years before 2020 and then 21 and 22. So he's only got 4 seasons with the way the rule works, which is very rare for a guy who signed in like what would be 2015 then, I think. Yeah, because 15, 16, 17, he was in rookie ball, then 18 and 19, he was in full season. So yeah, so he's going to get another option that's huge. They get to keep him around. I don't really know there's a lot more to say about it than that, Ian, but if you've got anything.
No, just that for roster building and team construction, it's a pretty big development. If he was out of options, they were going to have to bring in a 3rd catcher, most likely, because I didn't see him making the club out of camp.
Nope.
And then obviously they would have had to pass him through waivers. So
and
he would have
gotten claimed. I mean,
probably, no. So that's a pretty big development, and I think it also strengthens the case that we see Wong and McGuire as the opening day catching pair. Because I think that if Hernandez was gone, you could make the case that they would have been best served to bring in an MLB catcher and have Wong be that 3rd catcher opening in Worcester, since I think he has an option left, right?
I mean, he definitely has options. He's got at least one more.
No, I'm saying that that would have been an option, but with Hernandez like now sticking around, I can't see them both. I think you almost have to do that because you don't really want to have those 2 catchers together again in Worcester, splitting time and having to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is with Hernandez, we thought and it also explains why he didn't get a shot in the majors this year, because if he was out of options, then you got to get a look at him, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've got Abraham Almonte on the roster. Like you could have gotten a look at Ronaldo Hernandez, to see if you want to try and keep him next year. But instead, it was like, well, why aren't they giving him a look? And it's like, oh, that's why he's got an option left. So next year he'll enter the year as Worcester's primary catcher, and we'll see where it goes from there. So that's kind of an interesting development. But news-wise, that's about it. The Red Sox didn't make the playoffs. They made some transactions that were just kind of back end of the roster type things that we're not going to go into because there's no point. That's about it for news. So I guess in season in review, let's start in the high minors.
They claimed a guy today.
Oh God, Easton Mcgee. Yeah, why? I knew I was forgetting something. Okay. Forget what I said about nothing to talk about otherwise. So today, the last day of the season, which is rare, obviously, the Red Sox claimed right-handed pitcher Easton Mcgee, who, yes, is a real person, off of waivers from the Rays. And so had just made his major league debut legit 3 days ago. The Rays called him up. He pitched 3 innings, and then they DFA'd him as part of their normal sort of roster churn. And the Red Sox claimed him. So let's start with scouting report, maybe, Ian. What are you hearing about Easton Mcgee, who I'm going to admit I had never heard of before seeing his name the other day as a debut?
Yeah, so Mcgee, he was the Rays. He was back in the 2016 draft. I think he was their 4th round pick. He's a very big right-hander. He's listed at 6'7", 220. And as a result, below average athlete, not a lot of projection, obviously, physically. But given his size, he actually doesn't have a lot of velocity. He's like 90 to 93 with his fastball. Curveball is in the mid 70s, changeup mid 80s, cutter also like mid 80s, 85 to 88 range. It's a kind of just a below average 4-pitch mix. Talking to some people, I didn't get a single 50 on any of the pitches. It was mostly a bunch of like 40s and 45s, but except the one thing he does do really well is he's got good control, potential for plus control. And so he throws a lot of strikes. He can locate, and it's kind of like that pitchability type. I think sense I got was he's more of like an organizational depth arm in AAA than someone that you're counting on to be a major league piece. And given when he was DFA'd and when they claimed him, I have a feeling that they're going to try and do this thing that you're about to explain.
Yes. Thank you for that. That's what we call a transition in the business. So I think we all agreed as soon as they claimed him that he was a guy that they were probably going to try and sneak through waivers. But the problem, as James Dunn pointed out, is that he's eligible for minor league free agency. So if they were to simply DFA him and he cleared waivers and they outrighted him, he would become a free agent. So my guess is what they will try and do with him is what they've done in the past with like Franchi Cordero last year and with Jairo Munoz and Ryan Weber the year before that, is that you sign the guy to this would be a 2023 contract, like a split contract. Like I remember, I think it was Munoz's contract, but it might've been Cordero's, where it was like, at the time, the major league minimum was like $500K. It was going to pay him like $750K if he got called up to the majors. And so what that does is it's almost like a poison pill that helps him to clear waivers. So maybe you make it, I don't know. I don't know if you'd make it $1 million though. That's a lot. Anyway, you make it maybe $900K if he's in the majors. And so that helps him clear waivers because anyone claiming him would need to honor that contract. But then because he is under contract for 2023, he would not become a minor league free agent. So that's why you sign him to the contract, then designate him for assignment, put him on outright waivers. And if he clears into your minor league system. That's the only way to me that this claim makes any sense. He's not a guy that I could see sticking on the 40-man roster past November. I would rather protect Edinson Paulino or Wickelman Gonzalez than keep him on the roster. That alone. So that seems what they're going to do with Easton Mcgee. You could see him in the Worcester rotation next year, although their rotation is so loaded. I see him almost more as like a swingman type, like maybe filling that Brian Keller role this year of like starts when they need him to start, relieves when they need it, pitches out of the bullpen when they need him to do that. But, our projected AAA rotation next year has Brian Mata, Brandon Walter, Connor Siebold, Chris Murphy, and Victor Santos. And that's with Cutter Crawford and Josh Winkowski on the major league roster, which I think I would quibble with. But that's just kind of a, assuming someone's hurt type situation. So I think McGee, goes down and is kind of like the sixth starter. He starts if someone starts the year on the IL. He throws long relief out of the bullpen if they need him to do that. So I think that's kind of how that winds up working out. So yeah, thank you for the reminder on that, Ian. Okay. If I'm not forgetting anything else, cool. Season in review. And I guess that's kind of a good transition into season in review of high minors pitching. I guess the way we'll do this is just kind of like what the stories were at that position and like who the players to highlight are at that position at that level. And for me with high minors pitching, Ian, I think it starts with Brayan Bello. He has had an upward trajectory for a while in the sense of we've talked about this every year. He got a little better, a little better, a little better. To me, he has earned a spot in the 2023 opening day rotation and has shown he is almost certainly a major league starting pitcher. I think from there, it's maybe a little more open to interpretation. And I think there's a lot of people who think he has ace type potential. I think when he came up, some of the hullabaloo made it sound like that was the potential. I don't know that that's where it is. What are your thoughts on his year? I mean, started in Double-A, pitched great there. He, if I can just bring up his numbers, I mean, he started in Double-A and returning to the level after having been there last year. Let's see, in 37 innings, had an ERA below 2, a whip of 0.8, while striking out 48 and 37 in the third innings, just dominant in 7 starts. And then went up to Worcester, and it's tough to kind of separate it from there because he was up and down a little bit. Came up to the major leagues a little prematurely because the Red Sox needed him to, because of the fact that he, they needed arms, and he was on the 40-man, and he was throwing really well in Worcester. Struggled a little bit, went back down, came back up, and really again improved as the season went on. What are your kind of thoughts about Brayan Bello's season and how he looks positioned going into 2023?
Well, I think it's something I was just looking up some Baio stats. And did you know that he had the 6th highest WAR of any pitcher on the Red Sox this year?
I didn't know that, but I'm not terribly surprised given the amount of time that people miss. Because if you look at like innings pitched,
well, his WAR is higher than Eovaldi's though this year.
I believe it. I mean, Eovaldi missed some time and had a period where he really struggled.
Yeah, like the only guys higher than him are Rich Hill was 1st, Schreiber 2nd, Pivetta 3rd, Walker 4th, Whitlock 5th, Baio 6th. So I thought that was interesting. I was just looking, but yeah, I think that obviously it's a big developmental year for him. He's taken a really big step forward, and you kind of assuage some of the concerns that were about if he was more of like a reliever type too. He's a starter now. He's developed, he's got 3 potential plus pitches. He obviously started working on that curveball at the end of the season too. So I'll be interested to see if that's something that he develops going into next season. And frankly, he already has 4 pitches because his fastball and his 2-seamer, sinker, whatever you want to call it, are 2 different pitches. Yeah. But I think that the biggest development for me was with how he pitched the end of the season. I think it's you can kind of pencil him into the rotation for next season. Heading into kind of the second call up for him, I was on the fence about whether he's someone you want as like the 6th starter, or you're counting on him as a member of your top 5 heading into the year. And I think that with how he pitched, I would be comfortable with him as being one of those 5. I think for depth purposes, it'd probably be better if he was the 6th guy. But I think that, he's shown enough that I think that at least next season he could be like a back end type. And I think, the hope is that in the future he can develop into like a mid rotation guy. And with his stuff, and kind of, he seems like he really, enjoys the craft. He's got a good pitcher's acumen. And it's just, as long as command is going to be what determines it. If you look at his stats for this year, the biggest WAR is, 4.24 BB9. He walked way too many guys in the majors. And if you noticed in his outings, when he got into trouble is, walk a couple guys, gave up a couple weak singles, and boom, there's a run, there's a garbage run right there. And that's the thing with him is, if he can cut the walks down too, he'll get more pitch efficient. It will allow him to work deeper into games. And yeah, it was a very promising year for him, and his development was much needed for the staff, because I think a lot of the other high minors pitchers, while they had good years or showed some stuff, they didn't necessarily develop. They didn't really push towards that starting projection. I think a lot of them have kind of moved more towards the bullpen projection. And so him kind of establishing himself as a surefire starter is a very welcome thing for the staff.
Yeah, no question. And we go back to the thing that you keep hearing every time of how long it's been since the Red Sox developed a starting pitcher from scratch, right? I mean, Eduardo Rodriguez, they traded for when he was in Double-A. Before that, the last guy you could say was, depending on how you counted it, probably either Felix Dubront or Clay Buchholz, right? So it's been a hot minute since they developed a starting pitcher. So to have that in the rotation, cheap, reliable, is pretty huge. And I guess just to then transition to what you alluded to, there was the rest of that crop of pitchers that the Red Sox called upon and relied upon. You talked about WAR. Even just looking at innings pitched, the top 5 in innings, top 4, they had 4 pitchers throw more than 100 innings. Nick Pivetta, Michael Walker, Rich Hill, and Nathan Eovaldi. After that, you're under 80 innings, and you're talking about Garrett Whitlock, Cutter Crawford, Josh Winkowski. And then I would also probably throw in there, obviously getting far fewer innings, Connor Siebold, who got 18 innings over 5 appearances. But that next crew of guys coming up there that the Red Sox had to rely upon because of all of the injuries in the rotation. Pretty good year. But again, I'm with you. There's been talk about is Cutter Crawford a starter, because he had that one stretch where he was pretty good in the rotation. Josh Winkowski was kind of reliable, but I think we kind of all saw him for what he was by the end of the year. And Siebold, I think, to me, really has separated himself, but not in the way you like to use that phrase, in the sense that, I don't know. If I told you, Ian, that Connor Siebold never gets another start for the Boston Red Sox, would you be terribly surprised?
No, I'd have that as the minus favorite. I think that don't think he's a lock to be on the 40-man roster by December.
Yeah. I could see it. I don't think they're going to, just because they have so much more that they can whittle away.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but I think that
I could see it.
I would not be surprised at all if he gets traded, or if they can't move him, if they end up even frankly DFAing him. Yeah.
It's just to me, it's the inconsistency with the stuff. It comes and goes, and the feel for it.
Well, and it doesn't fit really in a bullpen role. He's low 90s in the bullpen. With just the way the game is going with relievers, you want power arms back there with a plus to better secondary, and he doesn't have that power profile. So I think that almost he would have more value for another team who thinks there's a chance he could be like a 5th, 6th starter,
or just a bulk reliever behind an opener for a year or two, cheap, right? Is he a guy that you maybe hope something clicks and the stuff is more consistent? To me, I at least wanted him to get into camp next year. But Winkowski and Crawford, I think, are the most interesting, because they're both guys I think that showed they can pitch in the major leagues. But the question is, what role? To some degree, I'm not saying they necessarily have proven they're going to have long, fruitful careers in the majors, but they're going to get shots in the majors. I could see, I'm very curious about Crawford in a long relief role. We've been talking about him in that role for a while, and he really wasn't able to fill that role for very long this year because of the needs they had in the rotation. But I don't know what your kind of outlook is on the two of them coming out of this year in terms of Crawford and Winkowski.
I think that actually for next season, I think that Crawford almost I think he's going to be on the opening day staff. I just think he's going to be in that Whitlock role. And I think they kind of telegraphed how they view him by coming out pretty strongly saying that Whitlock is going to be a starter next season.
Yeah.
And I think, if you think Cutter Crawford can be a starter, you don't make that determination right now. But I think that they want Whitlock prepared for that role. I think that's the role he's best suited for. He's got the best stuff of that group by far. And I think that it makes sense to have that known. Whereas I think Crawford, then it allows you to kind of free him up to move into that long relief role, that, 2 to 3 inning bulk role, which I think he's definitely better suited for. As you said, he did have that good stretch, but being a starter, you have to be consistent, not just for, for an entire season, not just for 4 or 5 starts. And that's a concern with him is the health. We saw it at the end of the year. He didn't pitch the last month or so due to injury. And then the stuff would just drop off in outings, and he had a couple outings where he just got lit. And his stuff is just the health, the stuff. It just, to me, it fits so much better in a single and multi-inning relief role. And I think as we saw this year, that role is extremely valuable to a team. And I think that, if you have him in that role, in addition to freeing up Whitlock to be in the rotation, also allows you to keep Tanner Houck potentially either in a closer or late inning role. And so I think just the whole like kind of carryover effect of having him established in that role really kind of makes the rest of the roster and pitching staff fit. And I feel the same way about Winkowski. We saw the big concern. I mean, and this is something we kind of talked about a lot before he was called up. It's just, he doesn't miss bats. It's just not going to play like that at the major league level. And, as a result, he got hit. It's not a true starter's arsenal, in my opinion. But again, in a multi-inning role, you par down the pitch mix and he can air it out. Whereas I've seen him in the bullpen and I've heard he's been up to like 98, 100 miles an hour. But, as a starter, he's sitting in like the low to mid 90s. Like, I'd much rather see him air it out in a two inning stint, kind of like he did in that one appearance at the end of the season, than having to worry about starting every 5th day and, being a guy who has like a 5K per 9. So I think that both of them, they had good years in the sense that they established themselves as, legitimate MLB depth options. But I think that both heading into next year are better suited to be more long relief roles rather than as true starters.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that with Winkowski, because the thing is, that was from when he was in the Arizona Fall League pitching in the bullpen last year, that those numbers of how much harder he was throwing came out. So it's like, if you're coming into next year with an outlook of like that AAA starting rotation, you've got Mata on the 40-man roster. You're going to be adding Brandon Walter and probably Chris Murphy. Like, you're going to have starting depth in AAA without those guys even. So I don't think it's not like this year where like you needed to keep guys and starting roles to have them for depth, and then they wound up needing that depth. I think it's less necessary if they think like, look, let's let Winkowski air it out in the bullpen. Let's see what it looks like. I think that's a very interesting thing. I don't know that they'll do it quite yet, but maybe mid-year you pull the trigger. You say, all right, look, Mata and Wilt Walter are healthy, as is Thaddeus Ward. Like, let's go. And I think that kind of actually brings it to that next tier of guys of, we almost forgot to talk about Brandon Walter. Come to think of it, we were prepping beforehand. Was great through June and then did not pitch in July, August, or September. What do you, I guess it's that kind of injury or returning from injury crew of Mata, Walter, and Ward, and then Chris Murphy, who's kind of a step behind the guys we talked about in terms of advancement. From that crew, they're all very different, but I don't know what your kind of outlook is on that crew coming out of this year.
It's an interesting crew, and that's what I was going to suggest too, is like kind of the injury guys is the next. Plus Murphy, who doesn't really belong, but he has to go somewhere.
But yeah, exactly.
Because I think he actually pitched. He had the most innings, I think, in the org, didn't he?
Probably because
he 150 something.
He also looked like he might have been gassed at the end of the year too.
Well, that also, but I think that of that crew, obviously, I think Mata is the most promising, and he definitely has the highest upside. I just, and you're going to hear this with 3 of these 4 guys. I talked to several scouts who saw him at the end of the year. I saw him. I'm not convinced he's a starter. But unlike those other guys, the Winkowski, Crawford tier, Mata could be like a disgusting closer. Like, his stuff is a step above all of those guys. And that's why he's in our top 10, whereas all those other guys kind of hovered in like the 9 to 10 to 15 range. Mata has like premium stuff. He was up, I've seen him up to 100. He's got the cutter, like, it's just the consistency's not there. And then again, the command. But if he's not a starter, this is like potentially, late inning stuff. And that's why I think that his role for next year is going to be really interesting to me, because I think obviously he's going to be a starter going into the season. Yeah, agreed. But I think we could see him especially if they're in contention, he's someone who would be a prime candidate come like June or July to be like, all right, let's start transitioning, especially because he's going to be on a pretty strict innings limit coming off, his second season after the surgery. let's move into the bullpen, let him air it out and see what we got. Because that stuff could really play at the major league level. And I think that's kind of like in contrast with the other guys, whereas I think Walter's a starter to me, but the stuff, we need to see what it looks like when it comes back. Like we saw Josh Taylor had a neck issue and it basically washed out this season for him too. So I need to see Walter back healthy to kind of see what he looks like. But I mean, pre-injury, I thought he was a starter, and I still like him long-term as a starter, more like a back end type, but still, there's starter potential there. Murphy and Ward, on the other hand, especially Murphy, I'm thinking are more like in that bulk category. But I think that the Red Sox have to be encouraged with what they saw from Mata and Ward coming back. Both, I think, had pretty strong seasons, all things considered. And even Ward, he's out in the AFL. His velocity is down a little bit. He was like 91 to 94 in his debut.
Okay.
Whereas back in his peak, he was like 92 to 93.
Yeah, I think that's what I saw from him in Salem.
Topped out at 96. So, it's down a tick, but it seems like he's starting to get better feel for his secondary pitches. And 7 strikeouts and 4, I think it was 7 and 4 2/3. That's always encouraging. So, with Ward, it's hopefully he can have an entirely healthy fall league and then, be good to go heading in next season. And Murphy is kind of like the odd man out of that group, as you said, but he threw a ton of innings this year.
152 led the system. You're right.
But I think we saw kind of the concerns with him is, his numbers in Portland overall were pretty good. But when he made that jump to Worcester, he just didn't miss bats, 58 strikeouts, 41 walks, and 75 innings. And that was the concern, is that there's not really a plus pitch. It's a good changeup. It's a hard 50, maybe a 55 changeup. But other than that, it's a bunch of 45s and 50s. And I don't know if that can work as a starter. I think it's more like a depth arm, like a multi-inning guy. But we'll see for next season. I think it's good, though, that the Red Sox have, at least 3 or 4 guys that you can count on, though, to be spot starters, because we saw this year that depth is super important. And I think as long as they, and then we'll talk about this obviously more in the offseason preview discussion, but as long as they can go out and get, I think, like not a top of the rotation, but like at least a number 3 to better type pitcher to fit in that rotation. I mean, I would prefer like a 1 or a 2. That I think it puts them in a pretty good position depth wise, where, you have Mata, Walter, Murphy, Ward, guys that hopefully maybe one of them takes a step forward like Baio does, not to that extent, but in the sense that they, you have a better feeling about them as a potential starter. And if they can do that, then maybe, you have another guy that you can pencil in the future rotation.
For sure. Of course, there's the flip side of high minors pitching. And I think we would be remiss not to mention just how good that Worcester bullpen was this year, and just how useful it was at the major league level to have that, I guess, bullpen of guys to tap into when they needed it. A number of guys who got, the auditions at the end of the season who, I think at least one pitched his way into potentially being, a favorite, I would say at this point, to make the opening day roster next year. A couple guys who look like they might be depth options. And also a number of guys who they had all year who they could call upon for, very short stints, who they were okay calling up to the major leagues and were also okay losing. And guys like Michael Feliz and Silvino Braccio, who they haven't been great, I think, in the past sometimes at having useful, fungible depth in AAA, and I think they did a very good job of having that this year. When you look at the guys who are in this bullpen this year in AAA, you have your normal kind of like 4A types in like the Jeff Hartliebs of the world, but Zach Kelly, Caleb Ort, Edward Bizardo, Franklin Hermann, that then down to guys like, AJ Politi, Chase Shugart. Durbin Feltman's like an afterthought now in this bullpen because of how strong it was.
Well, I mean, it's also because
the stuff's way down.
He's not the same pitcher he was.
Right. Fair point. But obviously Schreiber at the beginning of the year started there, and then he came up and was like one of the best relievers in Major League Baseball. Right.
Well, but I think that it's both a good thing and a bad thing, because it's a good thing that all those guys did well, but it's genuinely a bad thing that they all had to be used at some point because the major league bullpen was so
for
bad.
For sure. I mean, you look at like Sawamura, but like they had guys to come in and like be able to jettison Sawamura, be able to jettison, who were some of the other guys who were up there. I mean, the jury's familia thing was its own
Austin
thing.
Austin
Davis, yeah. Danish being up for a while and then going back down at the end. So it's I mean, they had that stable of guys to call upon if they needed them was the key thing. At least as far as going forward, Ian, like for what we saw from Zach Kelly at the major league level, I would pencil him in on the major league roster next year to start on opening day. I don't know how you feel about it. And that's even with adding a couple of guys. So I don't know how you feel on that.
Yeah, I didn't realize. So he has all three of his options still, which obviously I should have actually known that.
Right.
And I actually think so too. I think that he's pitched well enough that you could consider him in that role. I think that Frank Hermann and Bizardo, Bizardo's I think a minor league free agent, or he's out of options. I want to say, no, he's not out of options. I think Hermann is more someone you're going to see in the minor league, start in the minors next year. And I think Bizardo similarly if he's still in the 40-man. But yeah, I mean, it's always encouraging when you have the ability to, when you're turning to your fourth, fifth, sixth, AAA reliever of the season, and they're still coming up and able to get outs. And, I think both Kelly and Bizardo finished with like decent ERAs this season. That's what you want to see. And I think that the profile and type of players they were targeting has they've kind of refined that and gotten better with in identifying guys who actually have a chance to pitch at the big league level. So in bringing in, as you said, all those depth guys, it's helped. And they're going to have some really interesting decisions in this offseason because there's a lot of guys that we talked about that are on the 40-man bubble or need to be added to be protected from the Rule 5 draft. And there are going to be teams doing their homework on, AJ Politi, Chase Shugart, guys like that. And even when we get down to the AA level, there's some other guys that are definitely going to be interesting to take a look at. So
just mention them. You can just mention them right now.
Ryan Fernandez, Jacob Wallace, they have some guys who, have a chance to have big league quality stuff, and maybe they, command has held them back, things like that. But yeah, Ryan Zefferjon, even there's a lot of interesting, bullpen arms coming through the system right now. And it's going to be fascinating to see what they do with the 40-man situation with all those guys, because I think it'll give a pretty good idea of who they consider, the guys that they think have potential for their team. Then also to see who they can keep in the org, because I think it is going to be tough with some of these guys.
Yeah, because I mean, even if you just look at the guys who are on the 40-man right now, Franklin Hermann, I don't think is in any danger of being DFA'd. I do think there's no question.
I said he's going to start in the minors.
Right. Yeah. So he starts in AAA.
His command is not at the level, and
no,
he's not like. I understand why people got very excited for him, but I he's still more a middle reliever to me than a closer or like a late inning guy. I just don't think the consistency's there for right now for him to be like, as we saw, frankly, in his call up in his brief stint, to be like a late inning leverage guy. Yeah,
but like Orton, Bizardo, like, are those guys going to last all off season on the 40-man? Or do they start next year as fungible depth? Like it'll be. Look, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. Like, I don't think they're going to protect like a Politi, but it also wouldn't terribly surprise me if someone takes a flyer on him in Rule 5. Would you be terribly surprised? Or Ryan Fernandez?
No, I definitely could see that.
And I think that's one of those things where that's what you risk by having a good farm system, right? Like, that's not the end of the world. I mean,
well, and that's the thing you see with the Rays, you see with the Dodgers every year, they have several guys taken. That's what happens, as Yankees, you said, when you're trying to have like a deep top farm system.
Yeah. And the thing is too, it's like if the guy doesn't stick and comes back, and who cares? Like, remember, like Justin Haley got selected in Rule 5, right? And then he came back mid-year, and it was like nothing happened, right? So, we'll see how that winds up playing out, but I could definitely see Red Sox relievers being in the mix in Rule 5 and on waiver claims even this offseason. As far as the pitching in the high minors from there, Ian, I don't know. It's kind of funny to like forget that Jay Groom was a guy. There was a point at which Jay Groom would have been a really interesting part of this conversation, but obviously got up to AAA and was traded to San Diego in the Hosmer deal. And of course, actually, I think he won Pacific Coast League Pitcher of the Week the last season of the year, or the last week of the year, or something like that. So best of luck to him with the Padres, obviously. But there's some other guys. I mean, do we want to save like Shane Drohan for like low minors, or do we want to I'm just trying to think of where the good cutoff is for this, of the guys who like, do we do it by where guys started the year? I think that might be the way to do it. That sounds right to you. Yeah. Just skimming. I don't think there's anyone else we really need to get into.
Well, I think though that I think there was a pretty big divide to me when you look at like with how the rosters ended at the end of the season, with like everything matriculated to the majors or Worcester. Like the Portland staff by the end of the year was pretty light. You know, when they went into the playoffs,
the difference being like Thaddeus Ward, because he was still working
it was like Ward
back.
and Drohan. And then other than the guys, obviously they augmented it with some guys at the end of the year
Sterling Sharp,
from Greenville when the season ended. But for the most part, other than that bullpen and that rotation was pretty like fungible.
Yeah, I mean, that was the level where they had to go out and sign like Brett Kennedy out of Indy Ball,
and Sterling Sharp
when he became available.
So I do think that is something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, though, is like, I think there's a gap between kind of this wave of arms that's in the high minors and the majors, and then the next little tier of guys who ended the season in the low minors and are more like they're going to be in low A or high A to start next year. I think kind of in the mid minors right now, there is kind of a lack of pitching depth.
Yeah, like we project the Sea Dogs rotation next year right now, and I think that this is just darts. Like we haven't gone over this with a fine tooth comb, so like don't hold us to this, right? This is just like one way of lining guys up that we will definitely be changing. But it's like Ward, Drohan, Brian Van Bell. I'm cool with that top three.
I also wouldn't be surprised if Ward started in Worcester next year.
I think the only reason, I 100% agree.
I think it's frankly likely he does, but
Well, the only reason I think it might not be likely is just that they have, even in our projection right now, Mata, Walter, Siebold, Murphy, Santos there.
Yeah, but I think that's at least one of those guys is going to be gone.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. So that's another reason why the projection might change. But like Drohan definitely starts there. Van Bell definitely starts there. He was better after getting promoted from Greenville honestly. And then it's like Yusniel Padron, Artiles, and Shi Jung Liu.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't really see
and
Liu
that's not
starting in the rotation.
I don't either, but it's just kind of like if you look at who else there is.
Well, that's
like,
the thing. There isn't anyone else really.
You know, it's like, where does Grant Gambrell fit in after missing like a year and a half?
Yeah.
Like Tyler Uberstein probably isn't ready. Wickelman Gonzalez, you probably want to start in Greenville. Like,
no, you do want to start him in Greenville. You don't want to start him in Portland.
That's what I meant to say. You probably do start him in Greenville.
Yeah.
If I misspoke, sorry.
Yeah.
But like, there's just, I mean, that could be a level where an undrafted, like a minor league free agent winds up, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I could absolutely see that.
Yeah. And then like you look in the bullpen and like, it's not a lot of big names, but there still are, Taylor Broadway, Ryan Fernandez, like guys like that are interesting. Jacob Webb. Yeah.
Zephyr John.
But so it's.
Actually, you know what? We've got Wyatt Olds in that bullpen.
He'll probably,
he probably starts in Greenville.
Nah, I don't know.
He wasn't good in Greenville is the problem. So even if they're moving,
but the thing was,
I
think his numbers in Greenville are deceiving because he was being forced to throw a changeup that is not very good, and he would have good stints like first time through the order and then kind of struggle second time.
I just can't see
because he's not a starter. So
I just can't see his second full season being when they move him to the bullpen.
Maybe
I see them having him work as a starter to get more.
I mean, I just think that it's interesting that. With the way things turned out, though, it kind of like left a gap in the system that it's going to be interesting to see how it gets addressed.
Agreed. Put it this way, Wyatt Olds won't be starting the season in the Portland rotation.
I mean, maybe he will.
I don't think. Maybe he will. Oh, I
definitely would not say that definitively. I think he's more likely to do it than Padron, Artiles, or Liu are. So
yeah, that's probably fair. All right, fair enough. To be continued next episode. My lower minors pitching, plenty more to talk about there, although maybe not quite as big of names, but guys like Wickelman Gonzalez, Luis Perales, Amar Rodriguez, Cruz, Jetix, Paez. They're more fun names to say, if nothing else. But some guys. I mean, gosh, there's a lot of guys who are going to be matriculating up from the DSL who are very interesting. So we'll talk about that and more next episode. But now it is time to get to your emails. Again, if you want to email us, it's podcast@soxprospects.com. Hit us up with your thoughts, questions, things you want to know about, things you want to hear us talk about. If we like them, we will hit them up. First email, Ian, comes from Mark. And he says, after accounting for upcoming free agents rolling off the 40-man roster, the Red Sox will have 36 or 37 spots taken pending the James Paxton decision. Assuming the Red Sox plan to protect approximately, well, you know what? Let me actually say this. This is a question about non-tender candidates and guys who are out of options. Thank you for the email, Mark. Ian, I think we're going to table this discussion because it's going to be a whole segment of the podcast at some point this offseason. So I don't think we're going to go there quite yet. So we will do that on a future episode. Thank you for the email, Mark, but I think we're going to table that for now. Our next question comes from a different Mark Hermann. He says, okay, so I assume Brian Baio has played his way into the conversation of starting next year, presumably in Boston. I could go on and on about the moving pieces of our next rotation, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on Mata and his place next year. And we talked about that. I guess just to summarize, Ian, I think we both think he starts next year in the AAA rotation, right? I mean, that's fairly clear.
Yeah, I think he'll start in the AAA rotation, and how he pitches next year will go a long way to determining whether it's going to be, do they keep running him out as a starter, or is he someone they try to transition to a more of a bullpen role?
And need.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if he's shoving in AAA and they want to give him a shot at a spot start in the majors, then great. If they don't need him in the majors, but they have all kinds of issues in the bullpen, then maybe you move him.
I mean, we just saw though this year, like the importance of pitching depth. They were running out, 4 or 5 starters that started the season in Worcester at various points. So they're going to need those guys. And I think he definitely could play a role in that.
All right. Thomas emailed us. Some of these emails are a little older from late September, but he says, howdy fellas. Am I wrong to hope that they call Cedon Rafael up with only a week or 2 left, a la Franklin Hermann the other day? He's 22 and doing great. And I'm just thinking about kickstarting his MLBI. I'm sure they won't, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. Thanks for all your work. And please try to watch some more movies, Ian. That question is from Thomas. I think he means call up to the majors, which to me was never on the table.
I understand. Like Cedon Rafael had a good year, like a very good year. He made major improvements offensively, and his defense is outstanding. I think that, and we'll probably talk about this more when we get to positions when we talk about outfielders, but I think the hype with his bat has gone a little out of control. It's not like there are scouts who are concerned about if he's ever going to even make enough contact at the major league level to be an everyday guy. And it all comes down to, I understand like walk rate is not a great stat. And I think I've said this before, not all walks are created equal. Like you can go to the plate and walk on 4 pitches that aren't even close to the strike zone. And that doesn't mean you have a good approach or where you're doing at the plate. There are also walks where, you can go up there and put together a 10 pitch at bat, take 2 borderline pitches and, foul off a bunch of tough pitches that were in the zone and get a walk. And that's a good walk. And with Rafaela, the walk rate, I think it got slightly better when he was in Portland overall. But the chase rate is it's above 40%. And they're just a very few big leaguers who are good hitters at that level. Like you have to be basically an alien when it comes to hand-eye coordination and bat to ball skills to succeed with like a 40+% chase rate. And that's where he is right now at AA. And calling him up to the majors, he would just see sliders away and fastballs up and out of the zone on every single pitch and probably strike out 60% of the time because at this point in his development, he's not capable of not chasing those pitches. And so, obviously they didn't call him up, but he still has a lot of development to go with his bat. And that's the biggest thing holding him back now is, his approach, his selectivity, and his swings or his swing decisions, because until he improves that, there's going to be skeptics all around when it regards to his ultimate upside at the plate, because the raw tools are there. He's got power, he's got speed, he's got contact ability, but if you're getting yourself out, X number of times, and then you're chasing another, high percentage of the times, you're already putting yourself way behind the 8 ball when it comes to, getting on base and things like that. And so that's kind of the next stage in his development and something I'm keeping an eye out for what he does in winter leagues. And then obviously heading into next season.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even call it the next stage. That's like what he's working on, what he's been working on most of this season.
Yeah.
That's been like the key development point, as we've discussed. As we've gone into in some length. And I don't think it's a situation where you call him up. I mean, the quote to kickstart his MLBI, no, you need to make sure he's not going to chase.
If he's chasing AA breaking balls, imagine what's going to happen when he faces an MLB breaking ball.
Yeah,
that's not exposing him to better pitching is not the solution here. He needs to master this level before he's ready to take that next step, or even not master, but get to a reasonable level.
Mm-hmm. Our next email comes from our friend Aaron Mehta, who says, with the season grinding to an end, I find myself wondering what a Tristan Casas extension would look like. Obviously, it's extremely early, but we've seen other teams locking up talents early. Atlanta seems to be the master at this, but Tampa also has a history. I'm a believer in Casas long-term, but also large first baseman. don't always have the best health record and come with positional risk. What's a semi-realistic deal to be had? Is something like buying out all of his ARB and first 2 years of free agency. So an 8-year deal at $30 million total, way too low. It feels too low, but he's also had a month of plate appearances total, so it also feels too high somehow. Thanks, Aaron. It's an interesting thought, especially with the whole conversation being had around, Chaim Bloom saying the Red Sox used to be a team that would lock guys up and they need to get back to that. They gave Garrett Whitlock a contract after one full. To me, Ian, after next season might be when you discuss it more than when you do it right now, but I don't think it's off the table either.
I wouldn't. I don't think it's crazy to talk about it in the off season.
Yeah. If they can get a good deal that makes sense for both sides.
Yeah.
30 feels low though.
30 is low. I think that, Michael Harris is a significantly more valuable player because of his defense. Whereas I think Costa's going to be a very good defense first base just because Harris plays up the middle. It's going to inflate his WAR numbers. He also can run.
But what was the Harris
got 872 with 2 options. I think that
2 player options or club options?
I think they're club options.
Okay.
But they're like substantial. I think they're like 20 and 25 million or something. You can look. But so 8 years, that buys out his first 2 free agent years. I think that's the 8-year framework is what you look for. And I think I don't hate going to him and being like, we'll give you 8 years and 50 million and see what he says. Like, I would be comfortable, I think, at that number. I think that's a number where even if he turns it, even if he doesn't come along the way that I think he will and that the team thinks he does, that it's not a ton of risk. You're looking at like $6-7 million a year, depending on how you do it. And obviously it's not going to be structured like that, but just overall AAV. I think that's, something that I would be comfortable around that number, like the 50 million or so mark.
So the Harris extension is 8 years, 72 million with 2 club options. So it's 5 million for next year and the year after. Then it escalates to 8 million for 2 years, 9 million, 10 million, 10 million, 12 million in 2030. And then there's a club option for 15 million with a $5 million buyout and a club option for 20 million with a $5 million buyout.
So those are 20 and 25 million AAV, right? Is that how it works? Don't you have to add in the
No.
buyout?
It's the $5 million buyout gets added to the first 8 years. So that's the 72 should be, 10 and 16 is 26 and 9
so
is 35. Really. 35 plus 20 is 55, 57, 67. Yeah. So the 72 is the really money 82. Through it's the money, it's the money 8 years, 72 is the money for the 8 years plus the $5 million buyout for the first option.
Oh, right. Cause he's not going to get both. Yeah.
Right. And so if they pick up the club option, that will be, it'll only count for 10 million that year because you'll have already counted $5 million of a buyout for that year. So AAV is actually like 15 in that last year. The last option.
Yeah. I mean, it's a team friendly deal.
It's a very team friendly
deal. It's also
but like it's also Michael Harris, lot of money.
Someone offered you, $80 million and you're a 19 or he's 20 something year old who has never played above, is 21, never played above AA coming into the year. Like, yeah, that's a no brainer.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that but with Harris, the way Harris's game is, that I think that is going to obviously bring a higher total. Because when you look at the first baseman comps for those extensions are Singleton and Evan White, and neither of them got close to that amount of money.
No, so what was the Evan White contract?
That's why I think that something like 850 is the realistic number.
Yeah,
and I personally I'd go for it. I'd try to see if he'd be interested, because I just look at like the way the Braves have built their team. Their entire starting lineup basically is locked up. Like they have everyone, under team control, either on a rookie deal or a long-term extension. And that kind of security really allows you to like do things like go spend 20 million on Charlie Morton for your rotation, or like go get Kenley Jansen for 15, 20 million a year. Having that security, and knowing that, every year for the next 6, 7, 8 to 10 years, we've got Albies playing second, Olsen playing first base, Harrison center field, Acuna in right field, Austin Riley at third base, and Vaughn Grissom ready to go at shortstop if we don't re-sign Dansby. Like, that's just crazy to have that type of continuity and, team built up. So I would like to see the Red Sox try to start doing that.
The Evan White deal was 6 years, $24 million. But I completely forgot about this, and luckily Kotz notes it. He hadn't even played above AA yet.
Yeah, no, he got it in the minors still.
He got it in
I
the
think
minors.
Singleton did too, didn't he?
He might have just debuted. He might have been in a situation like Casas where he had
neither
played
of
like
those
a
worked
month.
out. Neither of those worked out at all.
Yeah, I mean, the Evan White deal, if you look at that, so it's 6 years, $24 million, which is a $4 million AAV, which is like
nothing.
Jake Diekman, not even half of Jake Diekman's deal.
Yeah.
But it's like the yearly contracts are like 1.3, 1.3, 1.4, 3 million, 7 million, 8 million. And then after 25, it's a $10 million club option with a $2 million buyout for 26, which they're probably buying them out. And then there's 2 more club options. And then there's like award bonuses. So that's another thing you do where you probably put in, but they can't do it with stats, but they can do award bonuses. So maybe you put award bonuses in the Costas extension, but it's like if Evan White gets 624 in the minors, you're not getting Costas for 30 at this point. I think you're looking at.
Well, 50. No, that's why I think like around 50 is where I think it's 50, the realistic number.
50 could be a number that would be very. But he
it's also
an interesting question.
But I also like I would definitely go to him. But I mean I could also see him being like, no, I'm good. Like that's fine. Because what did Olsen get this offseason?
I don't know, but
because Olsen was his I think his second to last ARB year, I want to say.
Yeah, I mean it goes way up.
Obviously, he got 135.
Right.
So if he plays for 4 years, makes whatever insert it won't be that much. It'll be maybe like $10 million in those 4 years if he does the 3 min years and then ARB 1. And if he's as good as we think he is, he could be in line for a contract like that. So you definitely could make the case to obviously wait it out. But it'll be interesting to see, and I think it's an interesting idea.
The next question is from Drew in Denver, who says, hey, guys, going through the forum during a super slow morning at work, Chris brought up Clay Buchholz and the Brian Baio thread in regards to the most hyped pitching prospects in recent organizational history. It made me recall Clay's Sox prospects pitching comp, Matt Morris, Chris Carpenter, and righty Cole Hamels. That got me thinking, for an off-season pod, what if you guys used the Wayback Machine to go through all the old player comps and have a blast and laugh looking at how some were close and others were just hilarious in retrospect? Aaron, Mike Sweeney, Bates. Just thought it could be a fun, lighthearted, slow season pod. Don't feel bad about the comps and don't take this email the wrong way. Never forget Deshaun Stevenson's draft comp was Michael Jordan. It's an interesting idea. I think what I would just say is that like, I don't have the time to dig through that. So I would just put this invitation out there of like, if anybody wants to ask about old comps or something, just to kind of laugh at ourselves a little bit, fine. But this is part of why I hate comps, right? Because it's like at the time you're using it to try and describe a player. And then you look back and it's like, oh, dear God. So fair enough. Our next question comes from Nick. He says, hey, guys, I love listening to your updates on the farm system. For 23, I see a rotation of Sale, Pavetta, Whitlock, Baio, and Waka. Maybe Rendon or Kluber if they don't re-sign him, him being Waka. Barring a major move that leaves guys like Crawford, Winkowski, and Siebold as depth, some experience at the major league level. Who else do you think could be ready early by midseason? Someone coming back from Tommy John injury like Mata, Ward, or Walter, or someone else, Murphy, Drohan, or a name I'm not thinking of, Nick. I think we basically talked about that, Ian. I don't know how I feel about a Sale, Pavetta, Whitlock, Baio, Walker rotation. I feel like I want something else there, but I think by Rendon, he obviously meant Carlos Rodon. I would like to see one more name in there, as we've kind of discussed, but interesting thoughts. Yeah, and we've kind of already gone through that. Next is from Martin in the UK, Ian, and he says, just caught up with episode 260 and your discussion about minor league players who could have an impact in Boston next year. That prompted something for 2022 about which I would appreciate your thoughts. If the Red Sox had been anywhere near the playoffs this year, would David Hamilton have been called up in time to make the playoff roster as a potential pinch runner? Given the lack of alternative runners in the organization, would this have been a sensible strategy? I know this wasn't what was meant by the original question or your answers, which were more weighted to a full season, but it could have a very significant impact in a particular situation. Many thanks, Martin. Ian, I think the answer to that is no, and your pinch runner is Jarren Duran. Right? I mean, that's
no, you're not going to add someone just to pinch run them in that capacity. You're either going to, as you said, you do Jarren Duran or you go sign like Terrence Gore or something like the Mets did.
Someone who has shown they can steal bags at the major league level. Because keep in mind that, yes, Hamilton stole 70 bases in the minors this year and was, I think, tied for third in the game in stolen bases. or at least in the affiliated minors, which I guess is also includes the major leagues because the major league leader was in like the 30s. But like, there's a reason the major league leader was in the 30s and that many people stole that many bags in the minors, and that's that they were playing with different rules this year. They had different bags, they had different pickoff rules, they had the pitch clock. I would be skeptical that Hamilton could come up and just be that like Dave Roberts, Terrence Gore, go steal a bag type. So I don't think that's necessarily the call there. Like I said, I think, there's a chance you keep Jarren Duran on the postseason roster if there's a spot for him, if you think that will be useful. Because Duran, I think, is, probably just as fast, even if he didn't have as much success stealing bases. Next question, Ian, comes from Daniel. He says, my question has to do with different prospect packages that have been offered in various trades over the years. Is there a rule against GMs disclosing what they offered or what was offered for what they were offered for players? Or is it considered to be in poor taste professionally? I feel like you don't hear about what was offered in a concrete fashion, quote, asking for the moon for Eovaldi and JD, end quote. I can think of a few exceptions over the years, like Lester and the A-Rod Manny Ramirez deal and Clay Buchholz and the Johan Santana trade, but not in a while. The trade deadline that comes to mind is the one where the Red Sox sold off in 2014 by moving Lester, Lackey, Miller, and Stephen Drew. The Red Sox seemed to prioritize getting major leaguers back that year. My interjection, they did, and it was an enormous mistake. The email continues. I've always been curious about prospect packages that were offered to them that year. Curious if you ever heard anything more definitive on those trades specifically. Thanks again for your work. I think you don't hear about it because it's not advantageous to be known as a team that is going to leak trade offers. Right, Ian? I mean, that's what it comes down to.
It's just not. It's, as he said, it's like a faux pas because you don't want to tell like a member of your organization that, yeah, we tried to trade you. Like, that's just not a good idea at all.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, no,
that's why you're not going to hear about it even after the fact. Sometimes, I mean, like you'll see things like in the Chris Sale deal, like
these names were discussed,
like
or
the White Sox asked for Devers and Dombrowski said, hell no. Like, yeah.
But you're not going to, no GM is ever going to publicly talk about like, yeah, we offered these guys for this player and they said no, or like this was who was being discussed.
I think the only other thing that got leaked from that trade is that like the White Sox were interested in a player, and I forget what the description was, but there were basically like two players that fit the description, and the obvious one was Brian Mata. And they said no to Mata and instead gave up like Victor Diaz.
Yeah, no, it was a hard throwing, like short season righty or something.
Yeah. And it was like there were two guys that made any sense. So like you might see that come out, but it's like, again, like you said, it doesn't help anyone to say like the reason you hear about the A-Rod trade is because it was agreed to.
And then the commissioner's office,
and then the commissioner's office vetoed it. So it's, or was it the commissioner's office or was it the players union? Because he was going to take a huge pay cut.
I may have been the players union, but someone vetoed it because he was giving a bunch of money back.
Yeah. So that's why that's why you heard about those. So, but that's why you're never going to hear about things like that. Our next question comes from Casey, who says, hi, Chris and Ian. I was thinking that with Chris Costas's power display since his call up being a welcome help to the power outage this year, what about nicknaming him the electrician? I don't know. What do you think about that, Ian? It's kind of
no thanks.
Yeah. Moving on, he says, on a more serious note, with the holes that need to be addressed heading into next season, I'm curious what your thoughts are on trading for Mike Yostromski. It's the sentimentalist in me talking, given how nice it would be to have another Yaz on the team, but also him playing right field and the Giants possibly retooling or rebuilding gives me at least some hope in it. However, his heavily regressing bat and age are definitely big areas of concern. It's an understatement. But then again, the outfield market the next few years fails to be particularly appealing to me outside of a few big names. Ian, I don't find myself particularly interested in the Mike Yostromski reunion. I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, I agree. He's not a good fit to me. They don't need another left-handed hitting outfielder, first off, who he can't hit righties at all. And he's 32, going to be 33. Like,
yeah,
no, I don't see the fit for me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you're looking more at like Nimmo, Haniger type names. I don't see them trade because the thing is and you're trading for him. Like,
yeah, you'd have to give up something for him.
Yeah,
like
where you could just sign.
He also has like years of team control still.
Yeah, he debuted pretty late.
I think he's in like maybe his ARB 1 year or something. I mean, he made $600K last year, so I don't know what his salary is this year, but yeah.
Next email is a very easy question from our Patreon supporter Al Mendel, who says, you guys list Tommy Pham's mutual option at $6 million, and so does Sport Track, but Mass Live stated in multiple articles that it's a $12 million option. First of all, who is right? This it was originally reported as a $6 million mutual option, but I think Chris Smith from Mass Live might have been the one who figured out the other day that like it's actually 12, and he was the first to report it. So it's not that it was conflicting information. It was like there was a report on what it was, and that original report was incorrect, and it's 12 million. So then he said, second question, do you think the Red Sox will try and pick up the option? It's a mutual option, and I don't think there's any chance
there's no chance to get at 12 million. It's not getting picked up. Yeah.
Would you have thought about it at 6?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think he says no at 6?
I think he probably gets around that on the free agent market. So
right.
It would depend if he liked his time here.
Does he like it here?
He thought the role was going to be substantial enough.
Yeah. I don't know how I would have felt at 6. I would have had to think about it, honestly. Al sent another question. He says, Ian and Chris, the attempt to convert Michael Geddes into a reliever seems to be going well. Have either of you seen him in Double-A? Does he have the potential to be a decent major league pitcher if the Sox leave him unprotected, which seems likely? Do you think a team might grab him in the Rule 5 draft and give him a chance to stick on an MLB bullpen all year? Thanks, Al. Ian, did you catch him in Double-A or no? I know we got reports on him.
I've seen him.
You've seen him?
I saw him.
I know you're kind of uninspired by him.
Yeah, no, I don't. Like, for conversion, he's, solid enough, but like, even I know his Portland ERA was good, but like, I think he had he had 8 strikeouts in 18 innings, 8 walks in 18 innings. Like that he doesn't miss enough bats. The stuff, like, it's fine. He's, I think it's mid-90s fastball. I'm trying to find my notes here. He's also a minor league free agent also. So I don't think that the Rule 5 thing is what you're going to worry about. I would think I could see him leaving, and he's not going to get Rule 5.
Right. I agree. He's not, but
it's 92 to 94 with like an average fringy breaking ball at 77, 82. I don't see anything MLB upside wise there for me.
Yeah. I could see them re-signing him and seeing if he continues to tick up with more pitching experience as a minor league free agent. And like, if you lose him in Rule 5, then like, have fun keeping him up on the 26.
Yeah, he's not going to get Rule 5.
He's not.
He's a great example of like, you can't judge something by ERA. Like,
right.
The swinging strike rate was 9%. Like, his strike rate was just 60%. He had 8 strikeouts. Like, his BABIP was 185. I don't think that's sustainable.
Right. Our next email is from David B., another Patreon supporter, who says, you're probably going to talk about this anyway, but I'm curious what your first takes are of seeing Tristan Casas in the major leagues. Is he doing exactly what you expected, or is anything good or bad surprising you or piquing your interest to see if it's real? He asked another question, but I guess starting with that, Ian, I think it's kind of about what I might have expected. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, no, he's done pretty much exactly what I expected.
A little bit of struggling.
He can hit the ball hard. He can hit the ball really far. He's going to get on base a ton. He's got a really good approach. His BABIP this year he got really unlucky with his batted ball outcomes. And I think that, if he can, I think he just needs to not get in the mold of being too passive. Like, if he's got a pitch he can swing, I'd like to see him be a little more aggressive. But it is refreshing and was nice to see, someone with that type of approach and, who's putting together, 4, 5, 6, 7 pitch at bats and getting on base, even though he hit only like 200 at like a 350 clip because of the walks.
Agreed. And then the second question is pivoting to the MLB pen. I know you've talked about this before, but it seems like your general take on 2023 is to sign a true late inning arm to close and a reliable lefty. Other than that, would you roll the dice with what the Red Sox currently have? I feel like the biggest advantage to this approach is the flexibility to move pitchers on and off the roster, which they really couldn't do in 2022. The key concern would be the lack of proven track record or sustainable recent performance. I guess the question becomes, for a team hoping to compete, how many, quote, proven, end quote, arms would you want to have versus the spaghetti at the wall types? Thanks, David B. I think that's a little bit of a mischaracterization of who you're bringing back.
Yeah, no, I think that they have, like, if you get a proven closer or someone to handle that 9th inning, I think you have like some guys that I would like. And like, I would like Schreiber. I'm fine with Schreiber as your 7th, 8th inning guy. I'm fine with Barnes and Kelly as middle relievers. I'm fine with Tanner Houck either being like a late inning guy or being like a bridge, 2-inning arm. Same with Crawford and Winkowski is like your kind of longer, last 2 guys in the bullpen. But that only works to me if you have like a true closer, and it doesn't have to be Edwin Diaz, but like the guy I think makes a lot of sense for them is Rafael Montero, who's with Houston this year. You would give him the 9. Yeah, I mean, he had 14 saves this year. Houston's filling, like, he's perfectly capable of handling the ninth, in my opinion. And then I also think, though, you need to go out and get another guy who you're comfortable pitching in the 7th or 8th inning, who's a lefty,
from the left, replacing the Strom role, basically.
Yeah, because it seems like Strom wants to be a starter, and like I would be fine with bringing Strom back. I'm not sure though if I want him as like the only lefty in the bullpen.
Yeah, it's weird. But, it's like he did fine this year, but it's also like the way he has put it at the end of the year is that he wants to start and wants to explore starting, but is also open to coming back. And it seemed like the way he was saying it, or at least it was being talked about, was that like he understood that if he comes back, it is not going to be as a starter. Or I mean, maybe he's going to explore the possibility, but like if no one wants him to start, then obviously he can't start, right? I just can't see anyone giving. Can you see anyone signing Matt Strom to start? I mean, I guess if not Jared Lorenzen. That's the hefty lefty. Michael Lorenzen can move into the rotation. It's possible.
Yeah, I could see like the Royals or someone signing him and trying it out, but
bringing him back.
Yeah, I think that I'd only be interested in it as him as a reliever.
Yeah, same. Especially given the injury history. Final question for this episode, Ian, comes from Vin near DC. Gonna have to tell us where near DC is, Vin. But he says, quickly, I started following the writings of Gabrielle Starr, who is quite good. Recently, she noted in a piece about Dave Dombrowski that he had great success at drafting talent. I take this to be different than international signings, although I guess it's all the same. But taking it literally about draft talent, looking at his drafts, which would be 2016 to 2019, I'm not overwhelmed the way a Rays or Dodgers system looks. It's Dahlbeck and Kyle Hart in 2016, Houck, Cutter Crawford, and Alex Scherf, who turned into Robles in 2017, Casas and Duran in 18, and some top 15 pipeline names in Lugo, Murphy, and Walter in 2019. Baio, Rafaela, and Mata were IFAs and may prove impactful. Casas looks really good, although time will tell, but top 30, especially top 10, are a lot of Bloom guys. Understanding the 5-year rule to assess drafts, we're heading into Dombrowski's look back year 4. What do you guys think about the pipeline under Dombrowski? I feel like Starr wrote a good piece noting DD is back in the playoffs, but this aspect seems a little exaggerated. Keep up the great work, Vin near DC. My first reaction to this, Ian, is the thing that we kind of tend to pound the table on a little bit, that Dave Dombrowski at most factored into the first and maybe like other day one picks those years. The president of baseball operations is not going to be involved in scouting, for example, and drafting Jarren Duran in the 7th. Like that's below the pay grade of the guy in charge, GM, P-Bops, CBO. So to me, it's does he bring in the people to do the job well? I think, Ian, those draft years are a little bit underwhelming. That said, as we've said a few times, the expectation out of a draft is if you get one useful major league hitter, maybe like 1-1, like a hitter and a pitcher from every draft, that's a great success. What do you think is a fair assessment of those years off the top of your head? And I'm pulling up the drafts right now in case you're wondering.
I mean, they're fine. Like, I think that comparing them like to the Rays drafts and the times and fair, because the Rays always had extra picks in those years.
Also, the Rays have not drafted as well as people tend to give them credit for. I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but like, there's a lot of times when like, oh, their farm system is so good, they must draft so well. And it's like, no, it's because they've traded guys and gotten prospects back,
Yeah, I think that I'm not looking at him. I'm not overwhelmed. I don't think they're that great. Like 16, he got one kind of big leaguer out of it. When you had the 12th pick is not great.
I mean, at the same time, like drafting Groom at 12 was, that's different. That's like, a guy that should have gone in the top 5 talent.
Well, and the Groom thing for that is tough because it's injury, like, is what set him back.
Well, it's injury, and then it's like, if you're going to sign Groom, I mean, they gave him over slot at 12, so there goes another $500K from your cap. So now you've got to get that back later. So now you're like dealing with that later. Dahlbeck also got over slot. Mike Shawaryn got way over slot, which is kind of interesting.
That was
to think
not
about.
Good.
But like Santiago Espinal was that year, got you Steve Pearce, and he's a major league starter now.
He was an all-star this year.
Yeah, I mean that's a guy that's worth
I would say
mentioning.
like it turned out about what I expected, but like there's not a lot of impact talent yet. Like Costas obviously has the chance to change that.
Sure.
But you also have to remember they're picking at like the end of the first round.
Yeah.
And I think the hard part is that there were just a lot of misses for like overslot or second and third round early picks. And that's kind of what set it back. Like if you look at the second round picks in his tenure, up until like Lugo, we'll see. But before that, like that's a rough little stretch right there, for example.
Yeah. Second and third tends to go that way. Yeah.
So
and it's,
it's tough when you're missing on guys you're giving, over $1 million to in the second round year after year.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I'm just going to say like the Cole Brannon pick, for example, like
CJ Chatham too, like CJ Chatham, Cole Brannon, and then Nick Decker is
Nick Decker.
Trio.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that, it's about average, I would say. I don't think it's like outstanding. I don't think it's terrible, but
yeah, I mean, looking at 18, like, you're discounting Thaddeus Ward, who's got major league potential.
Right, but like
Shugart and Politi could be like
they're drafting
relievers.
Guys who
Ryan Fernandez.
They're drafting guys who could be big leaguers, but there were a lot of high profile misses, and there's just no like they haven't had a guy who was like a later round pick. Like, I mean, I know it's a unique case, but like Spencer Strider with the Braves was like a 4th round pick and has turned into like an ace. Or not an ace, maybe like a high end MLB pitcher who might win Rookie of the Year this year, for example. Like they haven't had any guys hit like that, and that's I think that the tough part in that stretch is like, yes, you had guys like Duran kind of exceed expectations, but none of them have had staying power yet, or kind of like turned into even like an everyday guy.
And the thing with 19, you need to go ahead.
Just that in like between 16 and 17, they're not going to get a single everyday player out of it. That's tough. Like, I mean, obviously that's actually
it depends how you count Houck, because Houck I think is a back end reliever. Well, he's a reliever, but I'm saying he's a valuable back end reliever. But I don't disagree with your point.
Yeah, but I mean,
Dahlbeck looks like a.
But if
like
the best guy you're getting out of 2 drafts to me is like, I guess that's fine.
Houck
like
or Dahlbeck.
It's risky. It's like not risky. It's hard to draft and develop guys. But I think you would have hoped for a little more, especially in that 16 year when you had earlier picks and that's a tough one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's Costas is going to be interesting. But
I mean, conversely, 19 was the year you didn't have a first rounder. So but of course it looks bad.
But also, it's like the guy you took with your first pick is not turned out the way you hoped at all. Like,
Cannon. I mean, we'll just say like Cannon at the end of the year was org depth in AAA, like based on the usage. Like he was. I mean,
it's not based on that's what he is.
Like, but I'm saying like it's like he is that.
Oh, he wasn't even playing. Yeah,
he wasn't even playing. He was a bench guy who was going up and down. Like,
yeah, like he
came back from his injury and was on the Portland bench and then moved up to Worcester. Yes, I almost said Pawtucket. Moved up to Worcester and he was like on their bench.
Yeah,
so he's not a starter in the high minors at this point. Lugo, there's promise, but like you said, I mean that year was also backwards because it's like Cannon went under slot, Lugo went over. It was weird.
But I think that it doesn't matter though, that in the sense that like you had the 43rd overall pick and you took someone who got under slot and like that doesn't turn out. That's still like that's an opportunity cost of losing the 43rd pick is tough there.
Yep. Yeah. No. And that's
Lugo,
what I'm saying.
And Lugo was not over slot enough for that to matter. Like you could have gotten Lugo while taking someone closer to slot at 43, for example.
Yeah, it's like the over slot money that year went to like Salucci and Lubier,
which not ideal. Like Salucci has maybe a small chance if those command and
Carson
control games he made.
Bradley Blaylock got
up
some of the over slot money. That's okay.
But I mean, he blew out. Like
he blew out.
Right. It's a tough like. I don't think those drafts they're not great. They're not terrible. Like they're fine. They're like whatever.
Fine. They're middle of the road drafts. I think is what I would. There's no disaster draft in there. Like we've talked about some drafts as like you literally got no one out of this draft. Those drafts have major leaguers.
Well, no, like okay, I'll give you an example. The 2012 draft, in hindsight, is pretty disastrous for the Red Sox.
Or
you have
13.
But 12 you had 3 first round picks.
Yeah, and you got Marrero, Johnson, Light.
Yeah,
which I think you probably got about
2-ish
WAR.
13 is worse. You're right. 13, you had the 7th overall pick, and you got the high. Here's one. Who was the highest player in that draft who made the big leagues? Do you know?
Ball didn't. Stankiewicz didn't. I pulled it up, but I'm trying not to look. Who was the third? I don't even remember who the third rounder was.
John Denny.
Okay. Yep. Didn't make the majors.
But I'll just say it, like it's Kyle Martin in the 9th round.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's the one we always talk about.
The highest draftee who made it, and the best player from that draft is obviously Mauricio Dubon. But like, and that was a good pick. But the fact that it took to the 26th round to get a guy with MLB staying power, that's a rough one. But like that's like what I consider bad drafts is those 2 years. But the thing with it, when you're judging a draft, as we said, it takes years afterwards, and also you have to factor in like where they're picking, how they spent the money, like things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why that year is so tough, because it's like you had the opportunity to add impact talent and didn't get it. Which, to be fair, too, and we say this all the time about the ball pick, that was just a bad draft, too. Like, they were not the only team that whiffed on a high first round draft pick at all. I mean, that was the Mark Appel year. 1-1 didn't hit. So, although he did finally debut this year, which was cool. All right. Well, thank you all for your emails.
Wasn't that the year when he didn't sign? Or was that the year?
No, he signed that year. That was the year he signed.
I mean,
I'm almost certain.
I mean,
because he went one.
No. See,
Chris Bryant went early that year, but then it was like. I
disagree. Actually, I think the revisionist history on this draft is a lot kinder than you expected. Like, Chris Bryant went second. He's an all-star. John Gray went third. He's a solid mid-rotation starter.
But then 4 was Cole Stewart.
Yeah, 4 and 5 were bad, like Clint Frazier. But like at least 5, 6 both made the big. Like Colin Moran has stuck around for a while in the big leagues. Hunter Dozier, same thing. Austin Meadows has been all-star. Bickford has stuck around as a reliever. Dom Smith has been up and down. Hunter Renfroe is like a consistent MLB guy. Reese McGuire looks like a potential starting catcher for the Red Sox next year. JP Crawford is an elite defensive shortstop. Tim Anderson's an all-star and like a really, really good player. Marco Gonzalez is another solid mid-rotation. Like, that's a pretty good draft, actually. I think I would disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I would need to look. Let me see where the Jim Callis redraft is.
Overall, Aaron Judge went 32nd in that draft, just as point of reference.
Well, right. I mean, but at that point, you're like, okay, here we go. Redrafting the 2012 class. Why is his 2013 not coming up? Right.
Cody Bellinger went in the 4th round.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there were definitely guys in that draft, but for me, the strength of a draft you measure by like first the top of the top half of the first round, because those are the guys that, like, I think at that point you're talking industry consensus still.
I mean, but if you look at Trey Ball, like the only player in the top, he's the only player I think in the top 15 other than maybe Braden Shipley who didn't make the big leagues. No, he made the big leagues.
Yeah, Shipley made the big leagues.
So he's the only.
Well, there's make the big leagues and there's stick in the big leagues, which but Appel didn't.
But he's the only guy who didn't make the big leagues.
I mean, he didn't even make AAA.
Right.
Whereas he kind of got pushed to AA because Cole
Stewart has pitched in the big leagues for 3 years.
How many innings does he have though? Isn't he just up and down?
I mean, not a lot, but he's pitched.
Ryan Stanek at 29, Manaea at 34.
He's a setup guy for the Astros now.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying these are guys that, like, I'm saying they also made the majors.
Christian Arroyo went 25th. Like, I think this is not a terrible draft. Like, there's not a lot of impact guys at the top, but there's a lot of big leaguers versus, like, if you go to some other drafts, there's a bunch of guys who might not even make the big leagues. I mean, it also followed 2012, which was just an absurd draft. Mm-hmm. So, like, yeah, I think that
2012 was Correa, Buxton, Zunino, Gaussman, Kyle Zimmer,
like
Max Fried.
Like, I don't know. I just think that when you compare it to, like, here's an example. Like, look at the 2014 draft. Like, there's a lot. Like, I don't think Tyler Kolek has ever made the big leagues. He went second.
14's bad. Yeah, Aiken,
Alex
Kolek.
Jackson. He made it, but he's never stuck.
Nick
Max
Gordon
Pentecost never made it. Cody Medeiros never made it. Beatty made it, but blew out. Like, Newcomb, same thing.
Yeah. Like, you're right. 14 is worse.
Like, this is a way worse draft in my opinion.
Right. You are absolutely right. It is definitely because you've got Rodon and Schwarber and Nola, and Trey Turner, and Conforto and Turner.
But Conforto even
not much else.
Yeah, there's like Matt Chapman, but then I think the difference is, like, looking at the second and comp rounds, there's just nothing.
Like, although the Red Sox did well in that draft to get Chavis and Kopech.
Yeah, no, I agree. But
from where they were drafting,
looking back, like that's crazy that after the first round, the next All-Star is Jose Trevino in the 6th round.
Yeah.
Like, and then the 10th round had Romano, Jordan, Brandon Woodruff, Means, but like, that's crazy to me.
Woodruff and Means in the 11th in that draft. That's got to be.
But that's crazy to me that
rounds.
The gap, like, whereas you look at like 13, like you have Judge in the comp round, Knievel in the comp A, Devin Williams in the 2nd round, Bellinger in the 4th round. Like, you have a lot more in the Frazier, Cooper. Like, there's like
Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, Jeff McNeil. There's like 6 or 7 all-stars in the top, 10 to 12 rounds versus this one. You had nothing from first round to 6th to 10th round other than Trevino.
I mean, even the Super Bowl winner that year, as opposed to like Jeff Driscoll.
Yeah. Or, when did Russell Wilson go?
I forget. Not that year. Much earlier than that, though. Anyway, all right. Fair enough. Well, that'll wrap it up. Thank you all for your emails. Again, podcast@soxprospects.com. With that, we'll wrap it up. So thank you all for listening. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. You can follow the site on Twitter and Instagram, actually, at Sox Prospects. Follow Ian on Twitter. That's at Ian Cundall, IANCUNDALL. Follow me at SP Chris Hatfield. Again, you can support us on patreon.com/Sox Prospects. And we're going to give a shout out to our $5 level Patreon supporters. That list being Deb Kendall, Deb Kendall, Andrew Wallen, Lendl Martin, Ernest Shermer, Kyle C., Tyler Woodrow, Pat in New Hampshire, Jeff Trainer, David Nardone, Tim Harding, Bill Stanton, Evan Kirkwood, Chris Fox, James O'Hara, Nathan Kenyon, Ben and R.I., David B., Ben Burnett, Al Mendel, Kevin Katrides, Steve Gregory, James Bailey, Andreas Goldstrand, Corey Perrick, Forrest Perkins, Mark Herman, Brian Cowan, Andrew K., Jeff Harwood, Dusty G., Michael Murphy, Bob Introne, Pavel, Jordan Shabbat, Jeffrey Scruggs, Nicholas Staropoli, Mike Kawano, Chris Bollier, Curtis Waltman, Michael Stewart, Caleb Farron, John Kane, Jason Stoneburner, Jason Parker, Mike Granger, Mike Mignosa, Jeff Richardson, Michael Cullen, John McGee, Nicholas Lenson, Paul Manish, James P. McMahon, Jim Tuttle, Adam Gregory, Brian Rose, Jake O'Donnell, and John Mulqueen. Thank you all for your support. We appreciate it. We appreciate all of you listening. We'll be back in your eardrums next week with another episode. Until then, I guess keep an eye on the news page for our first fall-winter recap. That'll be going up next week. And, of course, keep your eyes peeled for this episode of the pod. Thanks to you all for listening.